The kingdom had waited years for this moment, yet no one was prepared for what would follow. Before the celebrations faded and before the royal drums fell silent, a battle would begin inside one family. It would not be fought with weapons. It would be fought with loyalty, tradition, love, and the weight of a crown. Morning sunlight spread across the rolling hills surrounding the ancient kingdom of Umuora. Golden rays touched crowded streets where merchants arranged fresh vegetables beside dusty roads. The smell of roasted corn drifted through the humid air, while buses and motorcycles filled the city with noise. Yet the center of attention was not the market. Every eye turned toward the royal palace. Servants hurried across the enormous compound, carrying flowers, polishing railings, and preparing for an important arrival. Royal guards stood proudly at the gates with perfect uniforms and serious expressions. The crown prince was finally returning home. For many years, Prince Malik Harper had lived in the United States. He studied business, politics, and finance while building a successful business empire of his own. Stories about him traveled constantly throughout the kingdom. Some people admired him, others worried he had become too influenced by life abroad. Inside the throne room, King Roland Harper sat quietly while several respected elders stood nearby. Concern filled the room despite the celebration outside. One elder feared the prince no longer respected tradition. Another worried he had forgotten the customs of his ancestors. The king listened without interruption. Finally, he spoke with calm authority. His son understood responsibility. He had been raised to become king. Still, even the king carried private doubts. As a child, Malik never accepted rules without asking questions. He challenged customs that seemed unfair. He questioned why wealth created barriers between people. He wanted explanations instead of obedience. Many elders disliked his curiosity. His mother, Queen Evelyn, secretly admired it. Now that same boy had become a wealthy, educated man, exposed to different ideas and different ways of living. The king knew change and tradition were destined to collide. Outside the palace gates, crowds gathered beneath the bright sky. Drummers played powerful rhythms, while dancers moved across the courtyard in colorful clothing. Excitement surged through the crowd when a guard announced the prince's arrival. A convoy of luxury vehicles approached slowly. Dust rose behind them as villagers cheered and waved. The first vehicle stopped. Silence briefly settled over the crowd. Then the door opened. Prince Malik stepped out with effortless confidence. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and strikingly handsome. His tailored black suit reflected success without arrogance. Dark sunglasses hid his eyes, while a gold watch sparkled beneath the sun. Yet his greatest quality was not his appearance. It was the warmth in his smile when he greeted the people waiting for him. The crowd erupted with joy. Elderly women wiped tears from their eyes. Children jumped excitedly. The future king had finally returned home. At the palace entrance, Queen Evelyn rushed forward. Formal protocol vanished the moment she saw her son. She embraced him tightly and complained that he looked thinner than before. Malik laughed and reminded her that he owned several restaurants in America. She insisted they were clearly not feeding him enough. Their laughter filled the entrance hall. Moments later, King Roland approached. The atmosphere changed immediately. Respect replaced emotion. Malik bowed his head respectfully. The king studied him carefully before placing a hand on his shoulder. The kingdom had been waiting. Throughout the day, celebrations continued. Musicians performed. Important families arrived with gifts. Politicians, business leaders, and village chiefs welcomed the prince. Many brought their daughters, hoping to gain his attention. Malik remained polite but distant. Home felt comforting, yet something about the palace felt unchanged. The same rules remained. The same expectations remained. The same pressure remained. That evening, after the final guests departed, a palace guard delivered a message. The king requested a private meeting. Malik followed him through silent hallways illuminated by moonlight and candles. Inside the throne room, only his father waited. The atmosphere felt heavy before a single word was spoken. The king began calmly. His son had traveled the world, he had built wealth and gained knowledge. He had become a man. Now it was time for marriage. Malik laughed at first, expecting a joke. The king did not smile. A bride had already been chosen. A royal alliance had already been arranged. The prince's amusement disappeared instantly. Shock turned into disbelief. Disbelief turned into anger. He could not understand how such a decision had been made without him. The king argued that tradition protected the kingdom. Malik argued that marriage required love. The conversation quickly became a confrontation. Neither man was willing to surrender. Then the king revealed a secret buried within ancient royal law. If the crown prince failed to marry before reaching a certain age, he would lose his right to the throne. The crown would pass to another member of the family. The revelation struck Malik like a storm. What began as a discussion suddenly became a threat. The prince stared at his father in stunned silence. The king remained firm. A royal princess would arrive soon. Malik would meet her. He would fulfill his duty. The future of the kingdom depended on it. But as Malik turned toward the palace doors, he delivered words that echoed through the silent throne room. His father might control the throne. He might control the laws. He might control tradition itself, but he would never control his son's heart. The doors closed behind him. Somewhere in the darkness beyond the palace walls, destiny had already begun moving toward him, and neither father nor son could see the surprise waiting ahead. The morning after the confrontation arrived with an uneasy stillness hanging over the palace. Servants moved quietly through marble hallways, careful not to attract attention. Guards stood at their posts with rigid discipline, yet even they sensed the tension spreading through the royal residence. The celebration of the prince's return already felt distant. A conflict much larger than anyone expected had begun. Prince Malik woke before sunrise and stepped onto the balcony outside his room. Cool air drifted across the hills surrounding the kingdom. In the distance, birds circled above forests, while smoke rose from village kitchens preparing breakfast. Normally, the peaceful view calmed him. This morning, it only reminded him how trapped he felt. His best friend, Darius Coleman, arrived carrying 2 cups of coffee. He immediately noticed the frustration written across Malik's face. The prince looked like a man carrying invisible weight on his shoulders. Darius handed him a cup and settled into a nearby chair. The conversation quickly turned toward the arranged marriage. Darius tried finding humor in the situation, but Malik was not interested in jokes. What bothered him most was not the chosen bride. It was the fact that nobody cared about his opinion. Every decision seemed to have been made before he even returned home. Their discussion ended when drums echoed across the palace grounds. The sound rolled through the air like distant thunder. The royal guest had arrived. Outside the palace gates, another crowd gathered beneath the bright morning sun. Luxury vehicles rolled through the entrance while villagers watched with excitement. The first door opened and Princess Victoria Sterling stepped gracefully onto the red carpet. She was undeniably beautiful. Her elegant crimson gown shimmered beneath the sunlight. Diamonds sparkled beside her face. Every movement reflected confidence, wealth, and refinement. Her parents followed behind her, equally impressive in appearance and status. To many observers, she seemed like the perfect future queen. King Roland welcomed the visiting family warmly. Queen Evelyn greeted them with kindness and respect. Everything appeared flawless until Prince Malik finally emerged from the palace entrance. The atmosphere shifted immediately. Victoria studied him with curiosity. The photographs she had seen failed to capture his presence. He carried himself naturally, without forcing attention. Even standing still, he seemed impossible to ignore. Malik greeted her politely. His words were respectful. His tone was cold. Victoria noticed instantly. Most men admired her immediately. Most men competed for her attention. Most men tried impressing her. This prince seemed almost uninterested. That realization bothered her more than she expected. Inside the palace, a grand reception followed. Wealthy leaders filled the hall, while musicians performed softly nearby. Victoria spoke confidently about her education, business interests, charitable projects, and international experiences. Many guests listened with admiration. Malik barely participated. Whenever Victoria directed a question toward him, he answered briefly. Whenever she attempted conversation, he responded with polite distance. The growing awkwardness did not escape the attention of their parents. Eventually, King Roland suggested the future couple spend time alone together. Several elders immediately supported the idea. Victoria agreed without hesitation. Malik accepted only because refusing publicly would create another argument. Together they walked toward the palace gardens. The gardens were breathtaking. Stone pathways curved through colorful flowers. Fountains sparkled beneath the afternoon sunlight. Birds moved between ancient trees while gentle wind stirred the leaves overhead. For several minutes neither spoke. Finally, Victoria broke the silence. She openly admitted that Malik did not seem pleased to meet her. The prince appreciated her honesty and admitted she was correct. Rather than becoming offended, she continued asking questions. Their conversation revealed surprising similarities. Both understood the pressures of royalty. Both had spent years studying abroad. Both understood responsibility. Yet beneath those similarities existed one major difference. Victoria viewed marriage as a strategic partnership. Malik viewed marriage as a personal choice. She believed love could develop later. He believed love should come first. Neither changed the other's opinion. Still, the discussion remained civil until a young palace servant approached carrying refreshments. She appeared nervous from the beginning. Her hands trembled slightly while balancing the tray. The accident happened in seconds. Her foot caught the edge of a stone pathway. The tray tilted. Bright red juice spilled directly across Victoria's expensive gown. Silence followed. The young servant immediately dropped to her knees and apologized repeatedly. Fear filled her voice. Tears formed in her eyes. Malik stood quickly and assured her it was only an accident. Victoria reacted differently. At first, she stared at the ruined fabric in disbelief. Then anger exploded across her face. She insulted the servant harshly. The terrified girl continued apologizing. The princess refused to listen. Malik attempted calming the situation. Victoria ignored him. Then, in front of everyone present, she shoved the tray aside violently. Metal cups scattered across the garden. The servant flinched in fear. Still unsatisfied, Victoria lashed out physically. The young woman cried out and fell sideways onto the grass. The entire garden froze. Malik could hardly believe what he had witnessed. His expression changed immediately. The calm prince disappeared. A different side of him emerged. His voice thundered through the garden as he demanded the princess stop. The nearby guards exchanged shocked glances. Servants stared in disbelief. Victoria defended her behavior. The servant had ruined something valuable. Consequences were deserved. Malik looked at her as though seeing her clearly for the first time, not as a princess, not as a potential wife, but as a person. And what he saw disturbed him deeply. The injured servant remained trembling beside him while he helped her stand. He asked whether she was hurt. He treated her with dignity. Victoria treated that compassion like weakness. The argument escalated quickly. Words sharpened. Pride collided with principle. Neither backed down. Then Malik delivered a sentence that changed everything. His father believed this meeting would convince him to marry her. Instead, it convinced him he never could. The words struck Victoria harder than any public insult. Nobody had ever rejected her. Nobody had ever questioned her worth. Nobody had ever chosen a servant's dignity over her pride. Without another word, Malik escorted the injured young woman away from the garden. Victoria remained standing beside the fountain, stunned and furious. That evening, whispers spread through every hallway of the palace. Servants discussed the confrontation. Guards repeated the story. Advisors exchanged worried glances. The arranged marriage was already collapsing. Inside her chamber, Victoria blamed Malik for humiliating her. Inside the throne room, Malik informed his father that he would never marry her. King Roland argued that one mistake should not define a person. Malik disagreed. To him, moments of power revealed character more clearly than polished speeches ever could. As father and son stared at each other once again, the distance between them seemed greater than ever. Neither realized another force had already begun shaping the future. Far beyond the palace walls, in a quiet village hidden among tall palm trees, a young woman named Aaliyah Brooks was climbing toward the top of a towering tree. Completely unaware that her life and the prince's destiny were racing toward the same unforgettable moment. For several days after the confrontation in the palace garden, tension settled over the kingdom like a storm cloud refusing to move. What should have been the beginning of a royal courtship had become a source of endless gossip. Servants whispered in hallways. Advisors exchanged worried looks. Village markets buzzed with speculation. Everywhere, people discussed the same question. Would the crown prince really reject a royal alliance because of principle? Inside the palace, Prince Malik avoided nearly everyone. He skipped formal breakfasts. He shortened meetings with advisors. He spent hours alone, wandering balconies and courtyards. The constant pressure exhausted him. Every conversation eventually returned to duty, tradition, marriage, or the throne. Nobody asked how he felt. Nobody asked what he wanted. Only Queen Evelyn seemed to notice his growing frustration. One morning she found him sitting alone beneath a covered terrace overlooking the hills. The sky above the kingdom was painted with soft grey clouds. Rain threatened in the distance. She sat beside him quietly. For several minutes neither spoke. Then she asked a simple question. Was he happy? The question surprised him. No advisor had asked it. No elder had asked it. Not even his father had asked it. Malik admitted he did not know the answer anymore. The queen listened patiently. She understood the burden resting upon him. Since childhood, every step of his life had been shaped by expectations. Every success belonged to the kingdom. Every mistake carried consequences beyond himself. When he confessed that he could never marry Victoria after witnessing her behavior, Queen Evelyn nodded quietly. She understood. Beauty meant little without kindness. Status meant little without compassion. Before leaving, she offered one piece of advice. Get away from the palace. Leave the noise behind. Breathe. The suggestion lingered in his mind throughout the day. The next morning, before sunrise painted the horizon, Malik slipped beyond the palace gates wearing simple clothes. No guards followed him. No luxury vehicles accompanied him. For the first time since returning home, he walked alone. The countryside felt alive. Fresh air drifted through tall grasses. Smoke rose from village homes preparing breakfast. Children chased each other through dirt roads, while women swept courtyards beneath the early morning sky. The simplicity felt refreshing. Nobody discussed royal succession. Nobody mentioned arranged marriages. Life simply continued. As Malik wandered deeper into the countryside, he noticed a crowd gathered near a cluster of enormous palm trees. Curiosity pulled him closer. People stood watching something above them. Their expressions mixed admiration with concern. Malik followed their gaze. Then he saw her. High above the ground, balanced between the branches of a towering palm tree, a young woman moved with astonishing confidence. One hand gripped the trunk, the other controlled a rope tied around her waist. Containers hung beside her while she collected fresh palm sap. She climbed effortlessly, fearlessly, like someone who belonged among the clouds. Villagers shouted encouragement from below. Several praised her strength. Others warned her to be careful. The woman ignored every distraction. Malik could not stop watching. She was unlike anyone he had ever met. There was no elegance designed for public attention, no expensive jewelry, no royal performance, only genuine confidence earned through hard work. When a branch shifted unexpectedly beneath her feet, several villagers gasped. The woman adjusted instantly, without panic, without hesitation. The crowd cheered. Malik found himself smiling. A short time later, she descended carrying containers filled with fresh palm sap. Sweat glistened beneath the morning sunlight. Strength radiated from every movement. As villagers surrounded her, she laughed and teased customers while organizing sales. Her energy transformed the entire gathering. Then she noticed him. Unlike everyone else, she showed no sign of nervousness, no excitement, no deference, only suspicion. She informed him that staring at strangers for long periods was considered rude. Several villagers immediately recognized the prince and bowed respectfully. The woman did not. Malik nearly laughed. Most people changed their behavior the moment they learned who he was. She did not seem impressed or interested. That fascinated him. When he complimented her climbing skills, she responded with dry humor. When he asked questions, she answered directly. Every conversation felt refreshingly honest. Eventually, he learned her name. Aaliyah Brooks, an orphan, a worker, a woman who had survived difficult years through determination alone. Their conversation remained brief, yet something about it lingered after every sentence. When Malik purchased a bottle of palm sap, she treated him exactly like any other customer. Not a prince, not a billionaire, just another person. The difference felt strangely comforting. Most people around him either feared him or wanted something from him. Aaliyah seemed interested in neither. As customers gradually dispersed, Malik stayed. Aaliyah noticed immediately. She questioned why a wealthy prince would spend time wandering villages instead of enjoying palace luxury. Malik admitted palace life felt suffocating lately. Her response was immediate. She called him a poor, rich man. The comment made him laugh harder than he had in days. Their conversation deepened naturally. Aaliyah observed people carefully. She noticed details others missed. After studying him for several moments, she delivered a statement that caught him completely off guard. He looked tired, not physically, emotionally. The observation landed with surprising force. Nobody inside the palace had recognized that exhaustion. Yet this woman understood it almost instantly. When he asked how she knew, her answer was simple. People who carried heavy burdens recognized the same weight in others. The words stayed with him. Before leaving, Aaliyah hoisted 2 heavy containers onto her shoulders and started walking down a dusty road. Halfway away, she glanced back. She asked whether he planned on standing there all day or following. Malik followed. Together they walked through winding village roads while curious residents watched from doorways and market stalls. The sight itself seemed unbelievable. A prince beside a palm worker. 2 people from completely different worlds. Yet conversation flowed effortlessly. They joked, debated, teased each other. Neither realized how unusual the connection already felt. By the time the afternoon sun began lowering across the countryside, Malik understood one thing clearly. For the first time since returning home, he felt lighter. The pressure remained. The royal expectations remained. The conflict with his father remained. But somehow, spending a few hours beside Aaliyah had given him something he desperately needed. Peace. As they finally separated and headed in opposite directions, neither noticed the elderly woman watching from a nearby porch. She smiled knowingly. Then she whispered something that sent chills through the air. Some meetings were accidents, others were destiny, and destiny had just introduced itself. After meeting Aaliyah, something inside Prince Malik began changing in ways he could not fully explain. The pressure from the palace still existed. The argument with his father remained unresolved. The threat hanging over his claim to the throne had not disappeared. Yet every morning, his thoughts drifted toward the same person. Aaliyah. The fearless woman who climbed towering palm trees without hesitation. The woman who spoke to him like an ordinary man. The woman who seemed completely unimpressed by his wealth, title, or status. For the first time in years, he looked forward to something beyond royal obligations. The following morning, Malik sat at the palace breakfast table, pretending to focus on his meal. Queen Evelyn watched him carefully. A small smile kept appearing on his face. The queen noticed immediately. She asked what was making him smile. Malik denied everything. The queen was not convinced. Before she could continue teasing him, King Roland entered the dining hall. The atmosphere shifted instantly. The king asked where his son planned to spend the day. Malik answered vaguely, outside. The king frowned. He believed the prince spent too much time wandering through villages. Advisors were beginning to complain. Elders questioned his priorities. The royal council expected greater focus on matters affecting the kingdom. Malik responded calmly at first. Then the conversation drifted toward Princess Victoria. The tension returned immediately. The king insisted the matter remained unresolved. Malik insisted his answer had not changed. Neither gained ground. Eventually, the prince left before another argument could begin. Several miles away, Aaliyah was already working. The morning sun had barely risen when she climbed her first tree. Villagers gathered nearby as usual. Many admired her strength. Others still questioned why a woman chose such demanding work. Aaliyah ignored them all. She had spent years proving herself. People who once mocked her now respected her. Their opinions no longer controlled her life. As she descended carrying fresh sap, she spotted a familiar figure approaching along the dirt road. Prince Malik. Again. Aaliyah narrowed her eyes. The prince was becoming predictable. She immediately questioned why he kept returning. Malik claimed he enjoyed her company. The answer sounded suspiciously honest. Aaliyah pretended not to believe him. Nearby villagers exchanged knowing smiles. Rumors were already beginning. An elderly woman whispered that the prince clearly liked her. Aaliyah rolled her eyes and told everyone to mind their business. The villagers laughed, so did Malik. The conversation continued throughout the morning. They discussed work, life, wealth, responsibility. At one point, Aaliyah studied him carefully and announced that he looked far too polished for someone claiming to enjoy village life. She pointed out his expensive watch, his soft hands, his effortless posture. Everything about him revealed privilege. Malik accepted the criticism with good humor. Aaliyah found that surprisingly refreshing. Most wealthy people became defensive when challenged. The prince simply listened. Later, while sharing fresh palm sap, Malik made an unexpected request. He wanted to learn how to climb. Aaliyah stared at him. Then she laughed so hard she nearly dropped her container. The image of a billionaire prince attempting physical labor was too entertaining. Still, his determination eventually wore down her resistance. The next morning, she agreed to teach him. The lesson was a disaster. Malik approached the tree with confidence. That confidence lasted less than a minute. The rough bark scraped his palms, his movements lacked coordination, his balance disappeared repeatedly. Aaliyah laughed through nearly every attempt. She compared him to a confused animal trying to climb somewhere it clearly did not belong. The prince responded by accusing her of enjoying his suffering. She admitted she absolutely did. The lesson continued. Slowly, awkwardly, Malik improved. Then disaster nearly struck. His foot slipped. For a brief moment, he lost balance completely. Without hesitation, Aaliyah grabbed the safety rope attached to his waist. The sudden movement pulled them close together, very close. For a second, neither spoke, neither moved. A strange silence settled between them. Aaliyah became aware of details she had carefully ignored before. His eyes, his smile, the warmth in his expression. She stepped back immediately. The moment passed. But something had changed. Over the following days, Malik continued returning. Sometimes he helped carry containers. Sometimes he simply sat nearby while Aaliyah worked. Hours disappeared during their conversations. They learned unexpected things about each other. Aaliyah loved books and borrowed them whenever possible. Malik preferred quiet places over crowded parties, despite what gossip suggested. Both enjoyed old music. Both valued honesty. Both understood loneliness better than they admitted. One evening, they sat beside a narrow river, while sunset painted the sky with shades of orange and gold. The water reflected fading sunlight. A gentle breeze drifted through the tall grass. The peaceful atmosphere encouraged honesty. Aaliyah finally asked why he truly kept coming back. The prince looked toward the river before answering. Inside the palace, everyone saw the future king. Around her, he felt seen as himself. Nothing more, nothing less. The answer affected Aaliyah more than she expected. She understood exactly what he meant. For years, people had judged her based on assumptions. Poor, uneducated, ordinary, few bothered looking deeper. Yet somehow, Malik did. The realization frightened her. Their friendship was becoming dangerous. She admitted as much. He belonged to a different world, a world filled with crowns, politics, wealth, and expectations. She belonged to none of it. Malik asked whether his title intimidated her. The answer came immediately. No. What frightened her was forgetting their worlds were different. The prince looked at her quietly. For the first time, he realized she carried fears of her own. Not fear of him. Fear of what might happen if she started caring. Neither spoke for several moments. The silence felt meaningful, comfortable, dangerous. Above them, evening shadows stretched across the countryside. The river flowed steadily onward. Neither noticed how long they remained there. Neither wanted to leave. As darkness slowly covered the landscape, both carried the same secret thought. Something unexpected was growing between them. Neither was ready to admit it aloud. But destiny no longer seemed interested in asking permission. By the second week of knowing Aaliyah, Prince Malik could no longer deny the truth. What began as curiosity had become something much deeper. Every morning, he found reasons to leave the palace early. Every evening, he replayed their conversations in his mind. The sound of her laughter lingered long after they parted. For the first time in years, his heart felt alive. Unfortunately, he was not the only one noticing the change. Inside the palace, rumors spread rapidly. Servants whispered about the prince's frequent absences. Guards reported seeing him traveling alone into nearby villages. Advisors exchanged worried glances whenever his name appeared in conversation. Even King Roland began paying closer attention. One afternoon, the king stopped Malik inside a palace corridor lined with portraits of former rulers. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, casting long shadows across the polished floor. The atmosphere felt tense immediately. The king asked where his son spent so much of his time. Malik answered carefully, "The countryside." The response satisfied nobody. King Roland pressed further. He reminded the prince that people constantly watched his actions. Every decision carried consequences. Every association carried meaning. Malik understood the warning. The rumors had reached his father. Still, he refused to offer explanations. The king eventually allowed the conversation to end, but concern remained visible in his eyes. Meanwhile, far from the palace, Aaliyah faced challenges of her own. Villagers had started noticing the prince's frequent visits. Some found the situation amusing, others found it troubling. A few openly warned her to be careful. Aaliyah ignored most of the gossip. She had spent years surviving judgment. Still, certain comments stayed with her longer than she wanted. People kept reminding her that princes and village workers did not belong together. The words annoyed her. Yet part of her feared they might be right. One afternoon, dark clouds gathered unexpectedly across the sky. Heavy rain threatened from the horizon. Most workers ended their day early. Aaliyah refused. Several customers still expected deliveries. She climbed one final tree while distant thunder rolled overhead. The wind strengthened, branches swayed. Villagers called for her to come down. She ignored them. The work needed finishing. Moments later, Malik arrived. The sight instantly alarmed him. Rain and palm trees were a dangerous combination. He shouted for her to descend. Aaliyah stubbornly insisted she was fine. The universe seemed determined to prove otherwise. Her foot slipped. Gasps erupted below. For one terrifying moment, she nearly lost her grip entirely. Instinct saved her. She managed to catch herself before falling, but not before her hand struck the sharp edge of a cutting tool. Blood appeared immediately. The injury was deep. Rain began pouring from the sky. Malik rushed forward. Aaliyah attempted pretending the wound was insignificant. Nobody believed her. Blood streamed down her hand. Villagers insisted she seek treatment. She refused. Malik refused her refusal. The argument that followed might have been amusing under different circumstances. Aaliyah claimed she had survived worse. Malik pointed out that surviving worse was not a medical plan. Eventually, he wrapped his shirt around her injured hand. The expensive fabric quickly became stained with blood. Aaliyah noticed immediately. She commented that he had ruined his clothes. Malik shrugged. Clothing could be replaced, people could not. The answer silenced her. Rain continued falling heavily. Thunder echoed across the countryside. Since she refused the palace clinic, Malik escorted her home instead. Her small house stood near the edge of the village. Banana trees surrounded the property. The roof showed signs of age. The walls carried cracks from years of storms. Yet despite its modest appearance, the house felt warm, authentic, comfortable. Inside, Malik carefully cleaned her wound using supplies borrowed from a neighboring villager. Aaliyah watched quietly. The sight surprised her. Most wealthy men she knew avoided even minor inconveniences. Here sat a prince cleaning blood from her hand without complaint. The contradiction unsettled her. Eventually, she voiced a concern she had carried for days. He did not need to pretend around her. If their worlds were different, he could simply admit it. Malik looked genuinely confused. He was not pretending. Aaliyah searched his face carefully. Years of hardship had taught her to recognize dishonesty. She found none. That frightened her more than lies ever could, because honesty created vulnerability. Vulnerability created attachment. Attachment created pain. She quietly suggested he stop visiting. Malik asked why. People were talking. The palace would never accept it. Their lives moved in completely different directions. Every argument sounded reasonable. Every warning sounded true, yet neither seemed capable of ending what had begun. Rain hammered against the roof. The small room felt increasingly intimate. Outside, the storm grew stronger. Inside, another storm quietly formed. Malik finished wrapping the bandage around her hand. Their eyes met. The silence between them changed. No jokes, no teasing, no distractions, only honesty. Malik admitted something he had been trying to ignore. He thought about her constantly. Aaliyah looked away immediately. The confession struck harder than she expected. She warned him again. Their connection was dangerous. He answered softly, maybe some things were worth the risk. The words settled between them. Neither moved, neither looked away. Time seemed to slow. Then Malik reached out gently. His hand touched her face. Aaliyah froze. No one had ever looked at her that way before, not with admiration, not with tenderness, not with complete sincerity. Her defenses began crumbling. The walls she spent years building suddenly felt fragile. Malik moved closer. Aaliyah whispered that this was a bad idea. He did not disagree. Neither stepped back. The rain thundered above them. The world outside disappeared. Then he kissed her, softly, carefully, as though afraid the moment might vanish. Aaliyah's breath caught. Every warning in her mind screamed for caution. Every fear reminded her of reality. Yet none of it mattered. For a brief, perfect moment, they forgot about crowns, wealth, expectations, and social status. There were only two people, nothing more, nothing less. When the kiss finally ended, both stood speechless. The realization hit immediately. Everything had changed. Aaliyah stepped back first. Her heart raced, her thoughts scattered. She whispered that this was trouble. Malik could not disagree, because far away inside the palace, forces much larger than either of them were already beginning to move. And neither realized that someone had witnessed the prince entering Aaliyah's home during the storm. The morning after the storm felt different. Prince Malik woke before sunrise, but sleep had offered little peace. The memory of Aaliyah lingered in every thought, her smile, her strength, the way she looked at him when their worlds briefly disappeared inside that small house. For the first time in his life, he understood why people wrote songs about love. For the first time in his life, he understood why kings sometimes feared it. Unfortunately, reality waited inside the palace. The moment he entered the main corridor, he sensed something was wrong. Servants avoided eye contact. Guards stood unusually rigid. Conversations stopped whenever he approached. A heavy silence followed him through the building. The atmosphere reminded him of a courtroom before judgment. One palace attendant finally approached. His Majesty wished to see him immediately. Malik already knew this would not be a pleasant conversation. Inside the throne room, several royal elders sat alongside King Roland. Their expressions ranged from disappointment to outright anger. The prince stepped forward calmly. Nobody offered a greeting. One elder spoke first. Disturbing rumors had reached the council. Malik remained silent. Another elder continued. Witnesses claimed the crown prince was spending considerable time with a village worker, a palm sap collector, an orphan, a common citizen. The words were spoken with obvious disapproval. King Roland finally turned toward his son. His expression was colder than Malik had ever seen. He demanded the truth. For a brief moment, Malik considered avoiding the question. Then he remembered Aaliyah. He remembered her honesty. He remembered how much he hated pretending. The answer came clearly. The rumors were true. The room erupted. Several elders began speaking at once. Voices rose. Criticism filled the chamber. Some called the situation embarrassing. Others called it reckless. One elder openly described it as a disgrace. King Roland silenced everyone with a raised hand. Then he focused entirely on his son. The king asked whether Malik truly intended to continue seeing her. The prince answered without hesitation, yes. The response hit the room like thunder. King Roland stared at him in disbelief. Years of training, years of preparation, years spent shaping the future king. And now everything seemed threatened by one unexpected relationship. The king demanded to know what Aaliyah offered that royal women could not. The answer surprised everyone. Peace. Silence followed. Malik explained that around Aaliyah he felt free. Nobody expected perfection. Nobody treated him like a symbol. Nobody reduced him to a title. She saw him, not the crown, not the wealth, not the future king, just him. The explanation only worsened matters. Several elders accused him of confusing emotion with responsibility. Others insisted he was blinded by temporary feelings. The prince disagreed. What they called weakness felt more real than anything he experienced inside the palace. The argument intensified. King Roland eventually issued a direct order. The relationship must end immediately. Malik refused. The refusal stunned everyone present. Never before had he openly challenged his father in front of the council with such certainty. The king warned him about consequences. The throne, his inheritance, his future. Malik listened quietly. Then he delivered words that shocked the entire chamber. If keeping the throne required abandoning the woman he loved, perhaps the throne was not worth keeping. Several elders nearly rose from their seats, others stared in disbelief. Even King Roland seemed shaken. Love. The prince had finally said the word aloud. Not admiration, not affection. Love. The realization changed everything. This was no longer a passing interest, no longer youthful rebellion, no longer curiosity. It was serious. Dangerously serious. Meanwhile, miles away from the palace, Aaliyah faced battles of her own. The rumors had reached the village. Everyone seemed to have an opinion. Neighbors whispered, friends asked questions. Older women offered warnings. Even children repeated stories they barely understood. Aaliyah tried focusing on work. She climbed trees, delivered orders, maintained routines. Yet concentration became difficult. Every path reminded her of Malik. Every quiet moment invited memories. The kiss, the conversations, the way he listened, the way he treated people. No matter how hard she tried, she could not forget him. That frightened her. Late that afternoon, an elderly woman named Naomi approached while Aaliyah sorted containers beneath a large tree. Naomi had known her since childhood. She rarely offered advice unless absolutely necessary. This time she seemed serious. She warned Aaliyah to protect her heart. Palaces were dangerous places. Power changed people. History rarely favored women from humble backgrounds. Aaliyah listened quietly. She understood every concern. Yet none of the warnings changed how she felt. Because Malik was not behaving like the powerful men people expected. He was behaving like himself. And somehow that made everything harder. As evening settled across the countryside, Malik finally escaped the palace once again. The argument with his father still echoed inside his mind. The threat to his future felt increasingly real. Yet his feet carried him toward the same destination. Toward Aaliyah, toward peace, toward danger. The sun was setting when he arrived near her home. Golden light stretched across fields and trees. The countryside glowed with quiet beauty. Aaliyah stood outside alone. She saw him immediately. Neither smiled at first. The weight of everything happening around them felt too heavy. Eventually Malik spoke. The palace knew. Aaliyah closed her eyes briefly. She had expected this moment. Still, hearing it aloud felt different. More real, more frightening. They sat together beneath the fading evening sky. For a long time they talked honestly. No jokes, no teasing. Only truth. Malik admitted he had refused to end their relationship. Aaliyah admitted she feared what might happen next. The future suddenly looked uncertain, dangerously uncertain, yet neither wanted to walk away. As darkness slowly covered the landscape, they sat in silence. The stars emerged one by one overhead. The air cooled, night settled gently around them. Then, from the shadows near the edge of the property, a hidden figure quietly stepped away. Someone had been watching. Someone had heard enough. And before sunrise arrived again, that person would carry information capable of changing both their lives forever. Before dawn arrived, the kingdom was already changing. The secret that Prince Malik hoped to protect had escaped into the shadows. The mysterious observer who watched him visit Aaliyah carried the story directly into circles of influence. By sunrise, whispers had become conversations. By midday, conversations had become rumors. By evening, rumors had become political concern. The news traveled through the kingdom faster than anyone expected. The crown prince was in love. Not with a princess, not with a wealthy heiress, not with a woman from a respected royal bloodline. With Aaliyah Brooks, a village worker, an orphan, a woman who climbed palm trees for a living. The reaction was immediate. Some people admired the story, others hated it. The divide exposed something deeper than anyone realized. Inside crowded marketplaces, ordinary citizens praised Malik's humility. They saw his affection for Aaliyah as proof that character mattered more than status. Many believed the prince represented a new generation of leadership. Inside elite circles, opinions were very different. Business leaders worried about appearances. Royal families questioned stability. Political advisors feared embarrassment. The controversy continued growing. Meanwhile, inside the palace, King Roland faced pressure from every direction. His advisors demanded action. The royal council demanded action. Even neighboring kingdoms quietly expressed concern. One emergency meeting followed another. The king sat at the center of every discussion. The same question echoed repeatedly. Would the future king truly abandon centuries of tradition for love? King Roland tried focusing on solutions, yet privately he felt something else. Fear. Not fear of political consequences, fear of losing his son. Every conversation between them ended in conflict. Every attempt to restore control pushed Malik further away. For the first time in years, the king felt powerless. That realization unsettled him deeply. At the same time, Princess Victoria remained inside the palace with her family. The situation humiliated her. She had never experienced rejection before. Everywhere she looked, servants whispered. Everywhere she walked, she sensed judgment. What angered her most was not losing Malik. It was losing him to someone she considered beneath her. The comparison wounded her pride. One afternoon, Victoria stood beside a palace window overlooking the gardens where everything began. Her mother entered quietly. The older woman studied her daughter's expression. Bitterness had replaced confidence. The change was impossible to miss. Victoria insisted she had done nothing wrong. The servant ruined her dress. The prince humiliated her. Everyone unfairly blamed her. Her mother listened patiently. Then she asked a simple question. If positions were reversed, how would she want someone to treat her? Victoria had no answer. For the first time, doubt entered her thoughts. Meanwhile, Malik continued visiting Aaliyah despite growing risks. The countryside became his refuge. Every visit offered temporary escape from palace politics. Every conversation reminded him why he refused to surrender. One warm afternoon, they walked through fields glowing beneath the sunlight. Wildflowers moved gently in the breeze. Birds drifted across open skies. The world felt peaceful, at least for a little while. Aaliyah eventually stopped walking. Her expression looked unusually serious. The rumors were spreading too far. People watched them constantly now. Children followed them through villages. Neighbors whispered whenever they appeared together. The attention made her uncomfortable. More importantly, it frightened her. She worried about Malik, his future, his family, his responsibilities. For the first time, she asked whether continuing their relationship was selfish. The question hurt him, not because she doubted him, because he understood why she asked. Malik insisted she was not the problem. The problem was a system that judged people based on status rather than character. Aaliyah smiled sadly. The answer sounded beautiful. Reality remained more complicated. They continued walking in silence. Eventually they reached a hill overlooking the valley. The view stretched endlessly. Villages dotted the landscape. Roads curved through forests. The kingdom appeared peaceful from above. Yet both knew a storm was building. As the sun lowered toward the horizon, Malik confessed something he had never shared before. As a child, he dreamed about leaving, not temporarily, forever. He dreamed about living without expectations, without titles, without obligations. Aaliyah listened carefully. Then she asked whether he still wanted that life. The prince looked toward the distant palace, visible on the horizon. His answer surprised even himself. No, because despite everything, he loved the kingdom. He loved its people. He wanted to help them. He wanted to lead. The problem was never responsibility. The problem was being forced to sacrifice happiness in exchange for it. Aaliyah understood, perhaps better than anyone else. For years, she sacrificed personal dreams simply to survive. Now she feared Malik might face the same choice. As evening approached, they returned toward the village. Neither noticed the luxury vehicle parked several roads away. Neither noticed the observers inside. Neither realized they were being watched again. Inside that vehicle sat two members of the royal council. Their expressions were grim. Everything they witnessed confirmed their fears. This was no passing romance. This was real. And real love was far more dangerous than temporary attraction. That night, the council delivered a recommendation directly to King Roland. The situation had reached a critical point. If the prince refused to obey, stronger measures would be necessary. The king listened quietly. His face revealed nothing. But when the meeting ended, he remained alone inside the throne room long after midnight. Moonlight spilled across the marble floor. The silence felt endless. Eventually, he opened an old wooden chest hidden beside the throne. Inside rested documents, letters, and memories from decades earlier. Among them was a photograph. A young King Roland, standing beside a woman who was not Queen Evelyn. The king stared at the photograph for a long time. Pain slowly returned to his eyes. A pain he had buried years ago. A pain connected to a secret nobody knew. A secret capable of changing everything Malik believed about his father. And before the next week ended, that secret would finally emerge. The revelation began with a photograph. Long after midnight, King Roland remained alone inside the throne room. Moonlight filtered through towering windows and stretched across the marble floor. The kingdom slept peacefully outside, unaware that one of its oldest secrets was preparing to surface. The king stared at the faded photograph in silence. The image showed a younger version of himself. Beside him stood a woman who was not Queen Evelyn, a woman whose memory had haunted him for decades. For years, he buried that chapter of his life beneath duty and responsibility. He convinced himself it belonged to the past. He convinced himself sacrifice was necessary. Now, watching his son fight the same battle, those old wounds refused to remain hidden. The following morning, King Roland summoned Malik privately. The message surprised the prince. After weeks of arguments, he expected another confrontation. Instead, he found his father waiting alone inside a small study overlooking the palace gardens. The room felt unusually personal. No advisors, no guards, no council members, just father and son. For several moments, neither spoke. Then King Roland placed the old photograph on the table. Malik picked it up. Confusion immediately appeared on his face. He recognized his father. He did not recognize the woman. The king finally broke the silence. Her name was Vanessa. Years ago, before becoming king, Roland loved her deeply. The confession stunned Malik. His father had never discussed his personal life. Never. The king explained everything. Vanessa came from a modest background. She was intelligent, kind, fearless. She challenged him constantly. She made him laugh. She made him feel alive. For years they planned a future together. Then reality arrived. The royal council intervened. Tradition intervened. Politics intervened. The future king could not marry a common citizen. The relationship ended. Roland obeyed. He chose duty. He married Evelyn. He became king. The kingdom remained stable. Everything worked exactly as tradition intended. Yet as the story continued, something unexpected happened. The king's voice cracked. For the first time in Malik's life, he saw genuine regret in his father's eyes. The older man admitted a painful truth. He never stopped loving Vanessa. Silence filled the room. Malik could barely process what he was hearing. All these years, he viewed his father as someone who valued tradition above emotion. Now he discovered a completely different reality. King Roland understood exactly what his son was experiencing, because he lived through it himself. The prince asked the obvious question. Why force him into the same fate? The king looked away toward the gardens. His answer carried decades of conflict. Because he believed sacrifice protected the kingdom. Because he convinced himself personal happiness mattered less than stability. Because admitting he made the wrong choice felt impossible. The honesty transformed the conversation. For the first time, they were not arguing. They were simply talking. Two men. Two generations. Two people carrying similar scars. Meanwhile, far from the palace, Aaliyah faced challenges she never expected. Public attention had become overwhelming. Journalists appeared near the village. Visitors arrived hoping to glimpse the woman connected to the prince. Some people treated her like a celebrity. Others treated her like a threat. Neither felt comfortable. She wanted a normal life. Instead, she found herself at the center of a national controversy. One afternoon, while delivering containers to customers, a luxury vehicle arrived unexpectedly. The vehicle immediately attracted attention. Everyone recognized palace transportation. Aaliyah froze. Moments later, Queen Evelyn stepped out. The entire village became silent. People watched from doorways and market stalls. Nobody understood why the Queen had come personally. Aaliyah certainly did not. The Queen approached calmly. Her expression revealed neither anger nor judgment, only curiosity. She asked whether they could talk. Aaliyah reluctantly agreed. Together they sat beneath the shade of a large tree. The conversation began cautiously. Queen Evelyn asked about her childhood, her work, her dreams, her goals. Aaliyah answered honestly. She expected criticism. It never came. Instead, the Queen listened carefully. The longer they spoke, the more surprised Aaliyah became. Eventually, the older woman smiled. Then she revealed something unexpected. Malik spoke about her constantly. The confession embarrassed Aaliyah immediately. Queen Evelyn laughed softly. For weeks she had watched her son change. The frustration disappeared from his face. The anger eased. The loneliness faded. Aaliyah brought something back into his life: hope. The conversation continued for nearly an hour. When it finally ended, Aaliyah realized something important. The Queen was not her enemy. Far from it. For the first time, someone inside the palace truly understood. Unfortunately, not everyone shared the Queen's perspective. That same evening, the Royal Council held another emergency meeting. The situation was escalating rapidly. Public opinion was shifting. Supporters of the prince grew louder. Traditionalists grew angrier. The kingdom was becoming divided. Several council members demanded immediate action. They argued that hesitation only made the crisis worse. One elder proposed a dramatic solution. The succession law should be enforced immediately. The prince should be removed as heir. The recommendation shocked even some council members, yet support quickly spread. If Malik refused tradition, tradition should refuse him. By the end of the meeting, a formal vote had been scheduled. Within days, the council would decide whether the crown prince remained the future king. The news reached Malik before midnight. He stood alone on a palace balcony staring across the dark kingdom. Wind moved through the trees below. Stars covered the sky overhead. For the first time, losing the throne felt truly possible. Everything he spent his life preparing for could disappear. His future, his title, his inheritance. Everything. Yet as he thought about Aaliyah, one realization became clear. The possibility terrified him far less than losing her. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled across the horizon. Another storm was approaching, and this one threatened not only a relationship, it threatened the future of the entire kingdom. The announcement struck the kingdom like lightning. By sunrise, news of the council's upcoming vote had spread beyond the palace walls. Market vendors discussed it between customers. Farmers debated it in their fields. Drivers argued about it at roadside stops. Everywhere people gathered, one question dominated every conversation. Would Prince Malik lose the throne? The kingdom had never witnessed anything like this. For generations, succession followed a predictable path. Now uncertainty threatened everything. Inside the palace, tension became impossible to ignore. Advisors hurried through hallways, carrying documents and reports. Elders held private meetings behind closed doors. Servants whispered constantly. Even the palace itself seemed uneasy. The atmosphere felt heavy, expectant, as though the building understood history was approaching. Malik remained surprisingly calm. The possibility of losing his position no longer shocked him. What troubled him most was the growing pressure surrounding everyone he cared about. His mother faced criticism for supporting him. Aaliyah faced public scrutiny. Even his father seemed trapped between duty and regret. The conflict was no longer about one relationship. It had become something much larger. That afternoon, King Roland summoned his son once again. The meeting took place in the same private study where he revealed the truth about Vanessa. This time, the king looked older, more tired. The burden of leadership weighed heavily upon him. For several moments, neither spoke. Finally, Roland informed Malik that the council vote would occur within 48 hours. Once completed, the decision could not easily be reversed. The prince listened quietly. Then he surprised his father. He admitted he was no longer afraid. The answer caught the king off guard. For weeks, Malik fought desperately. Now he sounded peaceful. The prince explained why. For most of his life, fear controlled every major decision. Fear of disappointing expectations, fear of failing responsibilities, fear of losing approval. Meeting Aaliyah changed that. She taught him something powerful. A meaningful life required courage, not comfort, not status, not perfection. Courage. King Roland listened carefully. The words reminded him painfully of the choices he never made, the chances he never took, the love he surrendered. For the first time, the king questioned everything he spent decades defending. Meanwhile, Aaliyah faced a difficult decision of her own. The growing controversy had transformed her daily life. Reporters appeared regularly, strangers visited the village. Some praised her, others blamed her for the kingdom's crisis. The attention became exhausting. One evening, she sat alone outside her house watching the sunset. The sky burned with shades of orange and crimson. Birds drifted across the horizon. The peaceful beauty contrasted sharply with the storm inside her heart. She loved Malik. There was no point denying it anymore. Yet love alone did not erase reality. If he lost the throne because of her, could she live with that? The question haunted her. Hours later, she made a decision. The next morning, she traveled to the palace. News of her arrival spread immediately. Guards exchanged surprised glances. Servants watched curiously. Nobody expected the village woman at the center of the controversy to appear voluntarily. Malik was stunned when he learned she had arrived. He hurried through the palace, searching for her. Eventually, he found her standing alone in one of the gardens, the same garden where his conflict with Victoria began. The irony was impossible to ignore. Aaliyah looked nervous, perhaps for the first time since they met. Malik immediately sensed something was wrong. She asked him to listen without interruption. Then she spoke. The words broke his heart. Aaliyah believed they should separate, at least temporarily. The prince stared at her in disbelief. She explained through tears she rarely allowed anyone to see. The kingdom needed stability. His family needed peace. His future mattered. She could not become the reason he lost everything. Malik refused instantly. The idea felt impossible. But Aaliyah continued. Sometimes love required sacrifice. Sometimes caring for someone meant protecting them from harm, even when it hurt. The conversation became emotional, painful, honest. Neither wanted to let go, neither wanted to say goodbye. Yet the fear surrounding them felt overwhelming. As they stood beneath the garden trees, neither noticed they were no longer alone. King Roland had been watching. Not intentionally, not secretly, he simply arrived at the wrong moment. Or perhaps the right one. From a distance, he witnessed everything. He saw Aaliyah's tears. He heard her willingness to step aside. He watched the genuine pain shared between them. Most importantly, he recognized something familiar. The same love he once shared with Vanessa. The same love he abandoned. The same love that haunted him for decades. A realization struck with overwhelming force. History was repeating itself. His son stood exactly where he once stood. The difference was simple. Malik still had a chance. Roland did not. That night, the king locked himself inside the throne room. Hours passed. Nobody disturbed him. Nobody knew what decision he faced. Outside, rain began falling softly across the kingdom. Inside, a lifetime of conviction slowly unraveled. Near midnight, King Roland finally rose from his throne. His expression carried unusual clarity. The conflict inside him had ended. At dawn, the council would gather. The vote would begin. The future of the kingdom would be decided. And for the first time in decades, King Roland planned to do something nobody expected. Something capable of changing the kingdom forever. Dawn arrived beneath dark clouds. Rain drifted softly across the kingdom as people gathered outside the palace walls. The news of the council meeting had spread everywhere. Merchants closed their stalls early. Villagers traveled long distances. Business leaders, chiefs, and ordinary citizens waited anxiously. Nobody wanted to miss the decision. The future of the kingdom hung in the balance. Inside the palace, the royal council assembled inside the grand chamber. The atmosphere felt heavier than any gathering in recent memory. Rows of elders occupied their seats. Government officials stood quietly along the walls. Members of neighboring royal families observed from designated sections. At the center stood the throne. King Roland entered first. His expression revealed nothing. Prince Malik followed moments later. The prince remained calm despite everything at stake. Queen Evelyn sat nearby, her hands clasped tightly together. Aaliyah was present as well. She occupied a modest seat near the back of the chamber. Many eyes turned toward her. Some carried curiosity, others carried judgment. She ignored them all. Her attention remained fixed on Malik. The meeting began. One by one, council members presented their arguments. Some insisted tradition must be protected. Others argued that centuries of law could not be ignored. Several openly criticized Malik's relationship. They warned that allowing such a marriage would weaken royal authority. The speeches continued for hours. The tension became exhausting. Eventually, the time arrived. The vote was about to begin. Then something unexpected happened. King Roland stood. The entire chamber fell silent. No one interrupted. No one moved. The king requested permission to address the council before voting commenced. The request was granted immediately. Roland stepped forward slowly. For several seconds, he simply looked around the room. When he finally spoke, his voice carried unusual emotion. He began by discussing tradition, the kingdom's history, the sacrifices made by previous generations. Everyone listened carefully. Then the speech changed direction. The king revealed a secret he had hidden for decades. He spoke about Vanessa, the woman he loved before becoming king. Gasps echoed throughout the chamber. Several elders looked stunned. Others exchanged shocked glances. Nobody expected such a confession. King Roland told the entire story: the love, the pressure, the sacrifice, the regret. For the first time in his reign, the king allowed people to see the man behind the crown. He admitted something even more shocking. Despite years of defending tradition, he had been wrong. The words hit the chamber like thunder. Some elders looked horrified, others appeared deeply moved. Roland continued, "A kingdom built upon wisdom should not fear growth. A kingdom built upon justice should not value titles more than character. A kingdom built upon people should never treat some lives as more valuable than others." The room remained completely silent. The king then turned toward Malik. For a moment, father and son simply looked at each other. Years of conflict seemed to disappear. Roland admitted that his son possessed something many rulers lacked: the courage to challenge unfair expectations, the courage to choose truth over comfort, the courage to love openly. Then came the moment nobody expected. King Roland formally recommended abolishing the ancient succession law. Shock exploded across the chamber. Several elders rose from their seats, others protested immediately. The king refused to back down. For decades, tradition controlled lives. Now it was time for tradition to evolve. The debate that followed was intense. Arguments filled the chamber. Voices rose, passions flared, yet something had changed. The king's confession affected people deeply. Many council members began reconsidering positions they once viewed as absolute. Hours later, a second vote was called. This time, the vote carried historic significance, not merely concerning Malik, concerning the future of the kingdom itself. One by one, council members cast their decisions. The count seemed endless. The chamber held its breath. Finally, the results were announced. The succession law would be abolished. The throne would no longer depend upon marriage. The chamber erupted. Some celebrated, others sat in stunned silence. History had changed. Forever. Malik remained motionless. For a moment, he could not fully process what happened. Then his father approached. The king placed a hand on his shoulder. No words were necessary. Everything had already been said. Across the chamber, Aaliyah fought back tears. The burden she carried for weeks finally lifted. The fear, the guilt, the uncertainty, all gone. Malik crossed the room toward her. This time nobody stopped him. Nobody objected. Nobody stood in the way. The future king and the woman he loved stood together beneath the same roof where their relationship had once been condemned. The symbolism was impossible to miss. Outside the palace, news spread instantly. Crowds celebrated throughout the kingdom. Music filled the streets. People danced. Families gathered. For many citizens, the decision represented more than romance. It represented hope, proof that change was possible. Months later, preparations began for a wedding unlike any in royal history. The ceremony united people from every background, wealthy and poor, powerful and ordinary, royal families and village workers. Everyone celebrated together. King Roland watched proudly. Queen Evelyn smiled through tears, and Malik stood beside Aaliyah, knowing he had gained something more valuable than any crown: love. Years later, people would still tell their story, not because a prince fell in love, but because that love changed an entire kingdom. The greatest lesson was simple. True leadership is not measured by power. It is measured by courage, the courage to choose what is right, the courage to challenge what is wrong, and the courage to follow your heart even when the world stands against you. Subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, your viewing location, and share this video.